Food is arguably the most important resource in Age of Empires 2, but all we see in game is just a single set of numbers. Throughout this series, we will be diving in to see exactly what foods each civilization prepared and ate, and how well I can recreate these recipes. This is Meals of Empires. Alright, a little bit of Spanish history. The way the Spanish are recognized in Age of Empires 2, how they're represented, is twofold. The first hand, you have the Umayyad Caliphate that came in, also known as the Saracens in game, came into the Iberian Peninsula and conquered just about all of it in the 700s. And then you have the Visigoths. You may remember them from the fall of Rome. They were living in the Iberian Peninsula at that time in minor kingdoms. They had just converted to Catholicism, and with the help of other Catholic empires in the region of Western Europe and Central Europe, they helped over a period of, I don't know, like 700 years or so, push back the Muslim Moors, Berbers, Saracens back out of the Iberian Peninsula and into North Africa. So all of that mixing is the main theme of today's recipes. The recipes are Verduras de Menestras, which translates just to vegetable stew. We have Arroz con leche, which is rice pudding, is probably what you'd be most familiar with in English. And then we have Marzipan, which is almost looks like a bread. It's sometimes found in like pastries or in cakes, but what it is just almonds and sugar combined. So kind of similar to the dessert we made with the gurjaras. So let's start cooking. We're going to start with the Menestra de Verduras, which is our vegetable stew. This is the first item to be cooked or prepared. It is an artichoke. It is an immature flower bud in the Asteraceae family. You would think this might be one flower with just a bunch of petals, but each of these individual petals is one flower. And that's a key trait of the Asteraceae family, the sunflower family. So what we want out of the artichoke is just the bottom layer here, the heart, as it's called in culinary terms. And this is what's called the choke of the artichoke. It's all these fine hairs that we don't want to be eating. So we're going to cook this for about 20 to 25 minutes in the pot of water that I have heating up here. And then we're going to add our carrots and our spinach to kind of get them started. So here's a few photos of what you might see as a more mature artichoke. These are thistles. There's one that I was cooking or growing in the backyard. There's one with a little bumblebee on it. And there's one with a swallowtail butterfly on it, all from California. So those are just a few versions of what you might see as a more mature artichoke. And you can see some of the hairs, the choke coming off. We do want to make sure to rinse this at the end to make sure we don't have any of those hairs left behind. Artichokes and carrots were both present in the Iberian Peninsula before the Moors arrived. They're both found in Western Europe since the time of the Romans. So I mentioned how it was the Visigoths that were there in the Iberian Peninsula following the fall of Rome. The kingdom of Asturias was established by the Visigoth nobleman Pelagius as a Christian kingdom. The kingdom of Asturias lasted, though, from 718 to 924. So his kingdom, all the way in the northern part of Spain, was able to survive the conquest. In 924, it was transferred from the kingdom of Asturias to the kingdom of Leon. All right, so that's started. We have our carrots in there. Now we can start making the marzipan. Marzipan comes down to two ingredients. You have your almonds and you have your sugar. Really isn't anything else to it. The trick is people use blenders in modern time, and we are just going to be using our mortar and pestle. The only other difference between recipes is what the ratio is of your blanched almonds to your sugar. And for this, originally I did like a 50-50, 80 grams of each. This time I'm going to be trying 100 grams of almonds and 60 grams of sugar to try to get the almond flavor to be expressed in greater quantities. Sugar cane, I should say, originally came from Malaysia and was transported to the Iberian Peninsula by the Moors. And Spain was had decent growing conditions for sugar cane. Producing sugar and turning it into like this powdered sugar that we have here, or granules of sugar, evolved fairly quickly. Sugar could replace honey in a lot of confectionaries, a lot of pastries and sweets. One thing to note with marzipan is you want to use it fairly soon after you create it. Like you would make it same day, use it same day in whatever you're using. Sometimes people add some sort of food dye and decorate it and shape it, because it holds its shape pretty well and it's fairly malleable. But yeah, this marzipan should be quite tasty once we have it all mixed up. It's just that process. I think I'm gonna have to take the sweater off because I'm heating up a little bit too much. The reason why you want to use the marzipan fairly soon after making it is because you have all of the almond oils that are going to be exposed to air once you crush it up like this. And the issue with oil when it's exposed to air is it allows it to oxidize. Oxidation being the process of oxygen molecules reacting with the compounds that are present in the oils, and often that leads to compounds that you don't want to have in the oils that are either going to taste bad or cause you some health issues. Let's put that aside and let's fish out our artichokes. So we're going to fish out both the artichokes and the carrots now and set them aside. We're going to rinse all of it just to make sure that we don't have any of the little hairs, the choke as it's called, left behind. And we just need a little bit of water in here to wilt the spinach. It doesn't take much. It's not going to take up much space. All right, first trivia question. What occurred first of these three options? The Spanish Inquisition, the Spanish arrival to the Americas, or the fall of the Islamic governance in Spain? I'll give you a few seconds to think. So out of the options of the Spanish Inquisition, the fall of the Islamic government in Spain, and the Spanish arrival to the Americas, the one to happen first was, of course, the Spanish Inquisition, which was from 1478 to 1831, lasted for about 400 years, 350 years, quite a long time. The original purpose was stated as a way of keeping Catholics from converting to Islam or Judaism. The Jews already had a hard time in Europe at that point in history, so a lot of them were coming to Spain, whereas Spain was seen as a more open and inclusive place. Everyone was more or less accepted to the level that you can be accepted in any medieval society. The Inquisition turned into forcefully converting Jews and Muslims into Catholicism, or killing them, or imprisoning them, or doing all of the terrible things that we learned about in history. The other 2 points in history, in 1492, we have Columbus sailing to America, and also in 1492, we have the fall of the Emirate of Granada, which is effectively the end of Islamic governance in Spain. So you never expect the Spanish Inquisition, but that was the answer there. All right, next up we have the Spanish. We have the spinach that will be wilting away a little bit at a time. I need to turn up the heat here. We just need it to wilt enough that we can roll it into little balls and cover it with flour. All right, while the spinach is heating up again, we can do the second trivia question. What cooking liquid from Spain is credited as being the best in the world? The answer is, of course, olive oil. Now, I'm going to get my excuses in because I am from California, which also produces fantastic olive oil. So the reason I think Spain is known as having the best olive oil in the world, first, there's a number of award ceremonies that rate different olive oils. A lot of these award ceremonies are being held in Spain. So that's number one. Number two, the European Union has lower standards and regulations for olive oil compared to the United States, or actually specifically California. I don't know if there's any specific ones for the nation of the United States. But in California, there's tighter regulations. In reality, I think you should just use whatever olive oil is decent and available to you. If you can find an olive oil that you like that isn't going rancid, maybe just stick with that unless you want to put in the extra effort to do your research and figure out, is that an actual decent olive oil? Or just go like on an olive oil tasting. I'm sure you have the time and money for that. All right, I think the spinach is just about ready to come out. Yeah, it's wilted enough. All right, there we go. And I'm gonna save this water for later as well. So the next item on our list is to fry up our spinach balls. We want enough olive oil in the pan to more or less cover half the spinach balls. And for our spinach balls, we're just gonna put it into our hand and just squeeze to get all the juices out. And then we'll just powder it in the flour and set it in the oil. That's definitely not hot enough. The idea with the flour is just kind of like breading the outside. That first ball did break apart a little bit, just because I guess it didn't start frying immediately. So you do want to have your oil nice and hot when you begin the process. Ooh, he's really feeling solid. These look pretty good. And I did make a mistake last time that I'm going to share. Last time I put the balls into the Menestra de Verduras when the other ingredients were cooking, but they just fell apart. So the ideal time to add them back in is right before you're ready to serve. And of course, with this oil, we're going to reuse some of it to cook our Menestra de Verduras. Just a life pro tip, don't put oil down the drain. Next up, we have our Arroz con leche, rice with milk. That's the literal translation. We are just going to call this rice pudding. The rice that was brought to Al-Andalus was probably something like Egyptian type rice. It's a shorter grain, not too glutinous. We use this for our mashi when we're doing the Saracens. We're going to use about a cup of rice along with 2 cups of oat milk. Oats were something that were grown as early as wheat was grown. Oat milk is not like a new age beverage or anything like that. Oat milk is just simply adding water during the process of grinding oats. We're just going to take a bit of a lemon peel, and we don't want any of the white innards. Most of the oil of the skin is right on the outside. That's normally what people would zest with a rasp, but we can just take a full slice of it. Test out your knife skills here. Ooh, getting a little thin. Okay. Okay, that was a nice one. Though you see I did get a decent amount of the white, but you can just kind of scrape it off. It's not that bitter. So we're just going to add these 3 little peels into our mixture, already ready to start bubbling away. So with an artichoke, you can just eat the leaves, and there's tender portions at the base of the younger leaves especially, and you would just peel off that little portion, maybe dip it into like a vinegary sauce, you dip it in, peel it off with your teeth, and quite enjoyable. For this, we're just getting to the heart of the matter. We want to cut off all of this choke, so we just have this heart portion at the bottom. The best way to do this is with a knife. You can try to use your fingers as well to try to feel it out, but the bracts, I don't know if I can get it well on camera, they move down into the lower section as well. It's almost like they have roots, like they're true hair. Denser hair than I have, that's for sure. So there are going to be some hard spots, but I would just say feel it out with your hands and figure out what you need to peel off. Before we get on to cooking the Menestra altogether, we have our third trivia question. What weapon, first used in Europe by the Greeks, was used by conquistadors in the Americas before being replaced by firearms in the 1570s? So the weapon that was used was the crossbow. Despite in Age of Empires 2 the fact that the Spanish are missing the crossbow, they did in fact use it throughout Europe, and in Age of Empires 3 the Spanish do have the crossbowmen available to them. The historical reasoning for this might be that the Europeans used the crossbow more than the Muslims and Saracens and people from North Africa and the Middle East, but that logic doesn't really hold, because even though the Spanish at that time period were predominantly Muslim at certain periods, the Saracens in Age of Empires 2 have the fully upgraded arbalaster. So yeah, don't really understand that logic. Though they did continue to use them. The conquistadors in the Americas were using a crossbow, even though in-game they're represented by, of course, having a long gun to go around and kill everything in sight, really. They have the mobility, they have the power. They are the ultimate conquerors. All right, so we have our arroz de leche starting to cook. We have our marzipan just waiting for us to get our finishing touches on it. And now we have our Menestras de Verduras ready to finish all the cooking. And we can throw in our onions, followed by some garlic. We can add our garlic. Onions and garlic are making up the bulk of the aromatics that are in this recipe. We're not adding any spices. At the beginning, artichoke can feel a bit overwhelming, but once you get into this stage, it's just like any other ingredient. All right, we're gonna add our carrots and our artichokes in there. It's gonna be a wonderful stew on a cold evening. And we can go back to our marzipan. When you touch it at first, it just kind of feels like sand. You're like, how is sand supposed to turn into any like shape, any recognizable shape? But then you remember sandcastles, and then you're like, oh, okay, maybe there's something to this. So I'm going to add a little bit of water. There we go. That's much better. Moved over to the bigger bowl, added a little bit more water. Now things are forming as they should be. All right, we'll set that there for a moment. The marzipan, as I mentioned earlier, does not need to be cooked. It's fully functional in its current state. What I am going to cook and sear is an apple. And for the presentation that I'm looking to do, I need to cut this apple into 12 pieces, so 6 pieces on each half that I've cut out here. There we go. While that's going, we want our marzipan ready. So our March bread does not need to be cooked, just needs to be shaped in the shape that we want it. But it is a little bit difficult to shape because it doesn't have any gluten or anything in it. So when you press it, it tends to crack like this. So you just have to smooth it into the shape you want. Let's see. Should we do it? Yeah, we'll do it like this and that. And we're going to square up 2 sides. And now I have to try to cut it in half. This thin side. All right, that goes there. All right, square up a side, square up the other side. Last part's round. There we go. That's looking a lot better. There we go. And this one's easy. I just roll it up into a log. And feel free to get your guesses in if you have an idea of what I'm making here. What it looked like in my head and what it's actually turning into are 2 almost completely different things. And boom. Cool. All right, but right before we try out the meals, 4th trivia question. What fruit imported by the Moors into Hispania is present on the modern Spanish flag and coat of arms? Give you a second to think that one over. We may have seen it in a previous episode. That fruit is the pomegranate. Right at the base of the Spanish coat of arms, you can see the pomegranate, and that coat of arms is also present on the flag. Thus, pomegranate is also on the Spanish flag. And pomegranate was part of our fesenjan, the stew that we made for the Persians last week, or in the previous episode at least. All right, I think we're ready to try out all our foods. We have our Menestra de Verduras, which you might remember from a few weeks ago. I mean, all these are the same dishes. And I'm going to add a little bit of lemon. And then along with that, we have the onions, the garlic, the carrots, and the artichokes. And this time the Spanish balls. I did it again. The spinach balls have stayed more or less together. These are the little fried balls, which you mentioned make the apartment smell like McDonald's when you walked in. Then we have the arroz con leche, our Egyptian rice cooked in oat milk, along with slightly different flavorings than a few weeks ago. It's a little bit different, so you'll tell me what you think of that. And then we have our marzipan butterfly. You mentioned it was a butterfly. You guessed correctly. This time I try to get it to look a little bit more like a butterfly. Yep. And then to go along with that, we have apple cider, because I felt like just having the apples and the marzipan wasn't enough. This, of course, is not from Spain. It is the Apple Bandit. Okay, that was good. Last time, your only remarks on this was that it was not salted enough.
That's a lot better.
Okay.
You did a good job salting it.
Yeah. Abby's breaking up the balls. Do you think I could have made the spinach balls a little bit smaller and then they'd be bite-sized?
And then they'd be crispy all over.
Oh yeah, that too. Moving on to the arroz con leche. The lemon there is just for aesthetics. I would not eat the peels that are next to it.
It tastes like one of those stores that you walk into that just has like incense and crystals everywhere.
Oh, okay. Like a homeopathic store is what my arroz con leche tastes like. Interesting. I'm guessing it's the orange blossom water that's throwing you off a bit. I don't remember if I added it last time, though I intended to. And then last up is the marzipan and the apple.
How do I eat this again? Okay.
Now, last time you tried it, you said it was grittier and grainier and coarser than you were expecting it to be.
I did?
Yeah. But maybe because you've had it already once, you're more...
No, it's a lot smoother this time.
Okay. The difference is I ground up the sugar as well as the almonds. So I think that did the trick.
Yeah.
Rating time. Execution?
Too watery, but there's enough salt. This is fine except for the crystals. Crystal store issue.
The feeling, yeah.
This is a lot better.
Okay.
9.
Okay, 9. Nice. And then should you serve this to your girlfriend?
8.
8, okay. Do you want to know what scores you gave me last time? On the episode that we can't show because the bad audio?
Yeah.
Execution, exactly the same, 9.
Really?
Yeah. Because this was less watery last time, and this didn't have the orange blossom water, so I guess that evened out the fact that the marzipan was a little bit coarser. Should you serve this to your girlfriend was a 7.75. You decided that was exactly the right number, and today we have rounded it up to an 8, so we are somewhat improving with this recipe. Yeah. I'm guessing the salt is what did it.
The salt helped a lot.
Homeopathic store. I mean, it's a great take.
I don't know. I don't have the vocabulary to like explain food.
That's pretty specific. So that is it for the Spanish. We have our mix of pre-existing ingredients from the Iberian Peninsula, or as the Romans called it, Hispania. We have the ingredients that were brought up with the Moors during the first conquering of the peninsula, and then the mixture during the Reconquista. Before I get any questions in the comments about this, the reason why we don't have paella here is, one, it includes tomatoes, which were not accessible to the Spanish. You could say I might make an exception for that, being that the Spanish were the first Europeans to arrive to the New World and where tomatoes were. But the second issue is that paella has so much meat and seafood in it that it'd be very difficult for me to make a vegan version of the dish without angering plenty of Spaniards in the process. I don't want to go down the same route that Jamie Oliver, that British chef, went down, where he added chorizo to his dish, and people from Valencia, where paella originates, were up in arms, and then other people in different parts of Spain where they regularly put chorizo in their paella just didn't say anything. So yeah, that is it for the Spanish. Next week will be the Bohemians. Stay tuned for that. I'll see you until then in the comments.